Awesome. Hello. I'm going to welcome up our panelists as well. Feel free to come on up and take a seat. Can we give a round of applause for our panelists? Let's go, panelists! Yeah. Thank you for the supersized water bottles. Awesome. Well, thank you, Merrick, and welcome 20s and 30s Faith and Money Talk. Would it have been a little bit of a great alliteration to say faith and finances? Yes. But for me, I am not a finances person, and I might have been intimidated by that word. So faith and money it was. But I am so glad that you all have showed up tonight between a big concert happening locally, and apparently the vice president is in town, so there was tons of traffic. Thank you for making it here. Really appreciate y'all. So my name is Kelsey Rutledge, and I am the young adults pastor at Reach Church. I love the whispering. It's like, some of you didn't know that. And I'm so glad that I got to tell you about that because I learned that too just a few minutes ago. So my name is Kelsey. Little background for me on this topic. I am just so excited to learn as much about this as you, and I need all the advice and wisdom that I can get. I grew up in a non-Christian family, and we didn't talk about finances at all. And so it wasn't until I was in college and post-grad where I got to learn more about budgeting and that kind of thing. But still, I have so many questions, and I'm just curious about who's in the room, whether you're in the camp where you know all about finances, and maybe that's even your job, or if there's a camp of people who also kind of similar to me, weren't taught about finances, but might know the biblical aspect of that. So just kind of a raise of hands in the room. How many of you just like know finances really well? Yes, raise them high and be proud. I am so thankful that you are here and you can continue to also teach us all. And then how many of you in the room are kind of in the camp, maybe like me, where you're like, wow, the topic of finances, I have a lot to learn. Wow, this is awesome. For those of you who are listening to the audio, many people raised their hands because this is not lively filmed. We have a great opportunity to be able to also text in questions tonight. There's going to be a slide behind me with slido.com and then a code you can put in. And so if there's anything that comes up tonight that you might have a question about or something that we didn't mention that you want to ask, feel free to text in questions as we go. We'll have 5 to 10 minutes or so of questions at the end that our panelists obviously won't be prepped for, so it'll be a spicy time. And then also, we send out a monthly newsletter, and that has tons of resources. Also, this recording of this night. So please feel free to pass this along to your friends and community who might need it. Our resources, we just try to be able to equip all of you so that this isn't just the only time that you hear us talk about this, that it goes beyond this night. And so again, feel free to share those resources with whoever needs it. All right, I think that's it. Sean and Olivia, time to introduce yourselves. Olivia, do you want to go first? Oh my goodness.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Howland. I'm 27 years old and live in the Bellevue area. We actually just moved this past weekend. But I am currently engaged. I'm getting married actually in, I think it's 11 days now. So very soon. We're very excited in the home stretch. And I currently work at Amazon. I've been there for 5 years now, and I'm a senior program manager on our Subscribe and Save team. And then connection to faith and finances. I was raised in a Christian home. Money really was not off the table when we talked about anything. So it was like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Dave Ramsey, right underneath. We talked a lot about money. It was something that we just had many conversations about debt, about saving. My parents were very passionate about it. So a lot of my personal experience is just from learning from them, learning from friends in the industry as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, you get to keep that mic. Yeah. Sean, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate you guys being here. Woo. So my name's Sean Miller. I am 58 years old. Been married for 35 years. Woo! To the same woman, by the way, so that's good. I have 2 kids, Lauren, 27, and Drew, 24. and I have a granddaughter who's 11 months old. Do I hear a whoop whoop on that one? Okay, good. There you go. Professionally, I've been in the finance industry for about 35 years. So yes, I'm the old guy on the panel here. 8 years in the mortgage business, initially out of college, and then I pivoted in 1996 to be in the investment and wealth management business. And I've been in that field for about 25 plus years.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'm just so excited for y'all and me to get to learn from them. And so we thought we would kick it off with a really fun question. And that is, just off the top of your head, what is the number one best piece of practical advice when it comes to faith and finances?
So for me, with this question, I would say that creating a budget isn't meant to restrict you, but it's meant to give you freedom to spend your money in the areas that you're supposed to. That really helped me reframe spending and also helped me reframe saving as well.
I like her answer. More on the practical side, I would say get out of debt and stay out of debt. Get on a budget and stay on a budget.
I love it. Short and
That's
sweet,
all I
to the
got.
point. That's
all I
great.
got.
Awesome. Also, too, I want to just encourage everyone, if you are a note taker, feel free to bring out your phone, take notes. And if, after this, I could borrow them from you, that'd be great. So our next question is, what passages and stories in the Bible have framed the way that you view healthy versus unhealthy financial stewardship? Sean, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think the passage was up on the screen a little bit earlier, and the verse is, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. So that little section in there, it's very, very easy in this world to kind of melt into the culture and how the culture thinks about money. And I fall into this all the time myself because I'm in the business world, and it's just sometimes overwhelming, just the amount of pressure that you get from the world. The harder path is actually to transform your mind and to think of things biblically, and to have that biblical view. And it's definitely a struggle. But that verse, I think, is encouraging to me to think about. And to think of just a little story. When I was first married, my wife and I would spend at least one weekend per year going to this little place in Carmel called the Cobblestone Inn. It was a very nice little place, and we'd spend the time to think about our goals for the year, goals for spending, goals for giving. And that time was basically to transform our minds so that we'd be thinking about things biblically, writing down what we wanted to do for the coming year. And that whole process would basically influence our behavior during the rest of the year. And so that practice of just sort of stepping back, thinking about things, reflecting on things. What does the Bible say about giving? What does it say about stewardship? And taking a break from all the pressure that you're getting from the world, I think is just really important. And that verse really kind of shines a light on that concept.
That's awesome. Any other scriptures come to mind that have been influential?
I always think of the verse that talks about where your money is, there your heart will be also. I think that's one that's spoken a lot about in church when they do the tithe and offerings. And I think it's really important to just think about where your heart is and where your money is being spent is also where you're spending a lot of your energy and your time. So looking at your budget and seeing where that's broken up into is a really just an evident way of where your heart and your time is also spent. So I think they're both very interconnected.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know that some of y'all might be like, oh, they didn't talk about the rich young ruler or, the woman that, or the 2 coins or the woman that, poured out the perfume on Jesus's feet. And I love that both of your answers, they weren't the cliche answers, but very informative answers, obviously. But yeah, thanks for that. The third question we have is, financial lessons are often learned through mistakes. What have you learned from your own and or someone else's mistakes?
So for me, I don't know if it's necessarily a mistake, but just probably a lack of guidance. I learned a lot from my parents. Just some background, my mom is one of 14 kids, and so resources were very thin. And my dad also just did not have the best guidance when it came to finances. So when they were married, they really made it an effort to focus on getting out of debt. My dad worked 3 jobs. My mom worked 2. They say they ate peanut butter sandwiches for like 6 months to do the best they could to get out of debt. And so when I was younger and I first started to make money, I think I was 8 years old and I started watching Pets or something in my neighborhood. My mom gave me 3 jars, and one was for giving, one was for saving, and one was for spending. And she said, okay, you're going to put 10% in giving, 20% in savings, and then the rest of the 70% can go into spending. And on the jar was supposed to be what those things we were either giving to or we were saving towards. And so for me at that time, we had a family friend that was a missionary in Hungary, and so we put their family picture on the jar. And then at that time, I really wanted a convertible slug bug, so I put that on my savings jar. Did not end up getting that, but I really wanted that at the time. And then the spending jar was just for the remainder 70%. Obviously, now there's a lot more bills that go into the 70%, but at that time, that was kind of my free, fun money. So I learned from a really young age what it looked like to connect the money that I was making to the vision and the, I think the heart of the Lord and the things that I was giving towards. I think we can get really caught up sometimes in just making money and giving it towards the church or giving it towards a ministry, but not actually thinking about what the church or the ministry is doing. And so what that did is it connected not only the money I was making, but also the work I was doing towards those individual things. And so I think it's really important to have vision for the things that you're giving towards and also saving towards. If you're saving for a house, put a picture of it in your room. If you're saving for a car, do the same. If you're giving towards a ministry or to a church, put their vision statement or their newsletters up so you can be praying for them and actively involved in also what the Lord is doing there, not just what your money is going towards, because it's the things that your money is doing, not only just the act of giving. Just a quick story. I remember when I was 12, that family in Hungary, I had saved up, I think it was $86 in my giving jar, and they needed money. And so we gave it over to them. And Heather, the woman, had called my mom, and she just said, I just want to let you know, our energy bill for the month was $86, and we didn't know how we were going to pay it. And you gave us the exact amount. And I remember learning or listening to that and just being in awe that my money that I had made went to something so specific that the Lord already had mapped out. And I think it's just so cool to share those stories of specific money things. For whatever reason, God's stories with money just hit sometimes a little bit harder than others because it's so specific and you really can't doubt it or deny it. I think it's just a really special thing when we can tie those things that what we're working towards the ultimate vision. And then with savings, if you do have that picture of the house or a car or whatever it is that you're saving for, it's easy to see that and then in your day-to-day make decisions towards that. So if you're, figuring out what you want to eat for dinner that night and you're like, well, I could go to Chipotle or I could go to Whole Foods or I could go to, Trader Joe's and get what I need for the week. It's easy to make those decisions in real time, and those things add up to what you're ultimately saving for. I think there's a lot of times where we can say, oh, I just don't have enough money, but we actually make decisions in our day-to-day that can save more money for those things if we just broke it down a little bit and paid attention to the things that we're trying to save for.
Whew, Olivia, that was so well said. My goodness. I love not only when you were talking about the jars of like saving, spending, and giving. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, when I got allowance as a kid, I just went and spent it on Pokemon cards and wasn't taught about saving. So that's just what I did. And I learned how to spend. And now we're redeeming that. But I mean, just what a beautiful tool. And even to like being able to practically visualize why you're saving and being more intentional with what you're giving to. Just, so much wisdom there. The next question we have is when it comes to a bunch of fun words, Roth IRA, 401k, HSA, HYSA. Quickly, what are each of these? How and when should they be utilized? Sean, go for it.
Great, I get the technical question. So we'll take them one at a time. and I'll hit these very quickly. If you have other questions about them, feel free to ask. So Roth IRA, is after tax dollars to fund the account. You can contribute up to $6,500 in the Roth IRA annually. The Roth IRA actually grows tax-free in the account. Yes, there you go. We got an accountant in the crowd here, so go. And you can actually, it's pretty flexible too. So any contributions that you make to a Roth IRA, you can actually take those contributions out at any time, which is different than a regular IRA. And then at retirement, it comes out tax-free because it's already been taxed. So that is a Roth IRA in 30 seconds or less. A 401k, 401k is it's a program that's typically set up with your employer. You can make automatic contributions into that 401k. It is pre-tax dollars going into that 401k. It does grow tax-free. There's lots of investment options. One of the nice things about a 401k is that oftentimes the employer matches whatever you put in. Sometimes 50 cents on the dollar, sometimes 100 cents on the dollar. Woo-woo for free money, right? One of the few free lunches in finance that you can point to. It grows tax-free, and then when you're ready to retire, it comes out, and it is taxable when you take it out, usually at 59.5. The accountant's saying, well, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
So I should maximize my 401k with my employer is what you're saying.
Your 401k, yes.
Okay, great. Noted.
Don't leave free money on the table.
That's right,
Yeah,
exactly.
there you go.
I think the maximum is $22,500. Sometimes there's restrictions depending on your income. HSA is a health savings account. This is pre-tax dollars that go into the account. It can be used for anything that your insurance coverage doesn't cover. So things like deductibles, things like prescription drugs. Oftentimes people use contact lenses and upgraded eyeglasses, things like that for the HSA. It does grow tax-free, and it's generally a good instrument, but they only allow, I think it's $3,850 to go into an HSA account. So it's not really that generous, but it is a good tool to pay for kind of healthcare expenses. HYSA, High Yield Savings Account. This is a bank product. Lots of banks offer these products. Typically, they're insured up to $250,000. Oftentimes, you definitely want to read the fine print on these because sometimes the banks charge extra fees associated with HYSA accounts. And then there's oftentimes penalties if you try to take it out early. You can definitely do your research on this, and none of this is investment advice, by the way. So just put that disclosure, get it on the recording. You can do the same thing if you open up a Schwab account, put your money in the Schwab account, and you can buy a money market fund, and then you have the flexibility to take that out whenever you want. So I prefer that as a technique, but sometimes the high yield savings accounts actually have a little bit higher rates.
That's awesome. You said one word, and I said our audience might not know what that is. Money market account?
Yes, money market account.
Do you want to explain that?
Money market account is a short-term, high-yielding instrument that's traded as a mutual fund. So typically right now the rates are about 5%, so it's pretty good. And you basically trade it on Schwab. It's daily traded, and it has things in there like treasury bonds or treasury bills, commercial paper, things like repos. You know what repos are. So
Totally.
Yeah,
Right there
exactly.
with you. Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Give it a round of applause for Sean. That was awesome. Very well summarized.
The boring technical question, right? I get it.
We have a more fun question coming
good.
right your way. How do you practically budget well? Any tips for beginners, and then also any tips for those who've been budgeting for a while?
Is that one for me too?
That's a you question.
Okay, so I would frame this for beginners. I would say think of it as in a kind of a 3-month process. Month 1, just get organized. Write down everything that you spend. Don't worry about what you've done in the past. Don't feel guilty about what you've done in the past. Just start day 1. Write down everything that you spend in a month. Buy Dave Ramsey's book, Total Money Makeover. That's also in month 1. Month 2, take a look at what you've spent, and it'll be eye-opening. You can't believe how much you spend on eating out or Grubhub or DoorDash or whatever. And then use that initial list as your guide to say, okay, now let's create a budget. And then start to cut out things that you think might make it work. Usually you're overspending. Everyone's overspending. So start cutting things out and create your initial budget in month number 2. And then month number 3, so work on it for a month, and then on month number 3, make your revisions, and now you're off and running with the budget. That's my plan.
That's awesome.
That's all I got.
It's a great plan.
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah. Also, too, I think something that has been helpful for me is knowing, obviously, like what my income is, post tax, and then knowing what my expenses are that are never going to change, like rent, that kind of thing. And then what my other kind of spending is, often clothes for me, in full transparency, which again, we're learning how to save. But what about advice for folks who maybe have been budgeting for a while, or any like apps recommendations or kind of programs, anything like that?
Olivia might have some suggestions here too. So again, Dave Ramsey, Every Dollar Budget is a good one. You Need a Budget is another great app that you can use. For folks that have been budgeting for a while, after you've been budgeting for a while and as your income starts to go up, hopefully, you can start loosening the reins a little bit on your budget. You can start saving for kind of things that you want to do, vacations, etc. But you can also change your mindset as you start to get more money, and as you start to save more. You can also say, how can I be more generous? If I'm only giving 10% to the church and to the poor, and now you've got this excess capacity, start thinking about how you can be more generous. What types of things, how can you be open to people saying, hey, I need something? So once you get to that point, after you've actually budgeted for a while and you have this excess, it frees you up to do more with your money personally and enjoy it. That's fine. But also to give more to people that need it.
That's awesome. Olivia, anything for that?
I use the app Mint. I really like it. It brings a bunch of different accounts in. So you can have your investment accounts, you can have saving, checking, all sorts of things in there. And I would say just make sure you're consistent. There's also Google Excel templates if you really like to do it yourself and build your own. You can do that as well. But the Mint app has worked for me, so I really like that one. The only thing is you can't separate Venmo, and like if you're like me and you buy a lot of different things on Amazon, you can't really separate exactly what it is if it's like a grocery versus something else. So just be mindful of that if you're doing different categories, but I like that app.
Nice, that's awesome. And also, I know what everybody's thinking. What are things that I should be budgeting for in my mid-20s and 30s and that kind of thing? And something that I didn't budget for but ended up spending a lot of my savings on was bachelorettes, weddings, baby showers, wedding gifts, that kind of thing, birthday parties, you name it. I paid for it. And so I would a quick little piece of advice is if you can make a budget for that, you're just going to thank yourself later.
Yeah.
Be a good friend. Show up. All right. So the next question that we have is idolization of money has two sides. The idolatry of saving and then also the idolatry of overspending. How do we avoid idolizing saving money out of self-protection or spending lavishly? How do we trust God with our financial futures?
All right. So I will take the saving side first, or I guess, saving out of self-protection. So something that I like, a verse or a parable that I really like with this context is the parable of the talents. If you're not familiar, basically a master has 3 servants and he gives them each 1 5 talents, 1 2, and 1 1. A talent is essentially just like their currency at the time. And he leaves for a while and then expects to be paid back at the end when he comes back. When he comes back, the one that had 5 has 10 now. The one that had 2 has 4. And then the one that has 1 buried the talent in the ground because he was afraid, and then dug it back up when the master came back and gave it to him and said, look, I have the 1 talent that you have. So I think what's really interesting about that, also that's found in Matthew 25, I believe. But what's really interesting about that is that the emotion that came out of the servant with 1 talent was fear. And so fear of not being able to have it when the master returned. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. And then the other thing is that the master, when he got the 1 talent back, he actually was furious and then gave that 1 talent to the one that now had 10. So I think that's how the Lord views us and money and stewardship of money. And when we save out of self-protection, it's really us saying that I want the control back and I'm not ready to give it to the Lord, to trust him that he will be my meet my every need and be my provider. So I think that parable goes hand in hand with us really trying to be self-protecting in saving. I think it's really good to save. I think it's really good to have emergency funds and to save for the things that maybe you aren't predicting for. But I also think that if we save out of a fearful mindset, that's not the right stance to take. And then with the overspending or spending lavishly, this also, I think, is a heart issue. I think in our day and age, social media, we're looking at everything that everyone else has. I've heard a pastor say it's not so much like what the Joneses have, where you're looking at your neighbor to your right and your left. Now you have everyone that you're comparing yourself to. And so I think when we're looking at what someone has, it's really easy to make impulse purchases or to buy out of want instead of need. And so when we're spending lavishly, I think also we have to check our heart and say, why are we spending this? Are we spending this because this will bring me joy, or is the Lord going to bring me joy? Am I spending this because this is going to make me comfortable, or is the Lord going to make me comfortable? And so with both of them, I think it's actually just a heart posture that you have to check and have your own personal conviction about. I don't think it's bad to spend money on nice things. I think it's, if you save for it and you know that you want to buy something, I definitely think you can. But I think it is that impulse that really is probably the unhealthy side of it. And that's something that we would just have to watch out for.
So well said. Yeah, when it comes to idolatry, Reach actually just went through like a mini series on idolatry within the context of 1 Corinthians, which we've been going through all this year. So if you want even follow-up resources on idolatry and what that means, that's a great resource right there. But I think when I think about idolatry, it's usually something that I'm daydreaming about, or something that like I have to wake myself up to, of like, oh, like that's kind of where I went with that thought. And so what are you thinking about most is a great way to know maybe if something's an idol in your life. And also too, I think with idolatry, it's asking the question is like, does this thing have mastery over me, or do I have mastery over it? And I think that that's something that for me, at least, as I'm asking myself that, that's where I'm able to almost take a pulse check of, oh, actually, this thing definitely has mastery over me. I need to like talk to my husband about it, talk to friends about it, ask for accountability, like that kind of thing. And the question I would ask are like, what steps are we actively taking to dethrone this idol in our lives, and that kind of thing. So yeah, within obviously that topic also comes generosity. And so how would you define generosity, and how can someone grow in their ability to be generous?
All right, so I took the cheat way out. I looked at dictionary.com, and generosity was described as being a quality of plentiful or large. And so I kind of view this as anything above the 10% tithe. I have been on the receiving end of a lot of people's generosity. And so, for example, this past year, I actually moved to Texas for about 7 months, and a couple had reached out to me on Instagram that I kind of knew, and they asked if I wanted to live with them for free. I said, yes, absolutely, I would love to. And while I was there, I realized that they are a part of a organization called Generous Giving. You can look it up online. I think it's generousgiving.org. Where their whole mission and goal is to give generously with the lens that Jesus had, and some of them have the conviction to give up to 40% of their income, which is incredible. And so after living with them, I got to really tangibly see what being generous looked like. And something that they had told me was, if you can budget being generous as well, if that's the state that you're in with your finances. So it's not just for anyone that just has a ton of money. But I think it's really important if you just start small. So if you're giving your 10% and then maybe you have $5 a month that you're like, Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do with this money? Where do you want me to partner with you? And who do you want me to give this to? I think it really starts to change your heart posture around being generous. So if you even have like a budgeted sum of money that you just are waiting to see what the Lord is going to do or where he prompts you with, that's just so cool to see, like in real time, not only just where your direct deposits are going for your giving, but also what you're doing in abundance to that. So if it's giving a friend a coffee that is having a hard time, or tipping extra to a server that looks run down, or whatever it is, you're the hands and feet of the Lord. And I think that that's something that we can really tangibly do. And then in your heart and your head, it also frees you up to be even more generous. It just detaches you from your money in general to say, Lord, this wasn't even mine to begin with. I'm just giving this back to you and your kingdom.
So good. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I think it's also too one of those things. I love what you said where it's like tithing. Like most of us would think, oh, tithing, that's being generous, but it's what's above tithing. I love that, just that small little reframe. I think that's so powerful. And I think too, when it comes to generosity, it's not as much about like management as it is motive. Mm-hmm. Like, am I giving out of a full heart, trusting, like in that parable, trusting that God's going to provide again and it wasn't mine to begin with? Or are we giving out of like a begrudging like motive? Like, are we giving bitterly or giving because we feel obligated? Like, those are two different heart postures. And so, yeah, I love that. Okay, so on that concept of tithing, why do you give or tithe, and what's the purpose?
Want me to start with that one?
Yeah, go for it.
I view tithing as sort of the starting point. And there was a number of years when I was overly obsessed with the budget and overly obsessed with, okay, I've got to pay this, got to save for this. And I completely ignored tithing for many, many years. And I think that the Lord just kind of nudged me a couple times through different circumstances. And my wife and I just said, hey, we just need to start giving again. Let's just start there. Let's just start with a percentage and start giving again and see what happens. And I think one of the lessons learned there is that God doesn't really need your money. He wants you. And when you start with something and say, hey, this is all yours. This is everything that you've given me. All my talents, all the money that I have is yours. And I'm just going to make a step in that direction of faithfulness. It's amazing what God can do when you start moving in that direction.
I love that too, because especially too, as you know, where we're at, there's not many of us in this room who are coming out of a place of lack. And so we can't experience dependency on the Lord if we're not in lack. Otherwise, we're just comfortable. And so it's purposely putting ourselves in that position of lacking or of not being in control and surrendering to Him and saying, okay, God, do what you want. And so how often are we willing to be uncomfortable? Yeah. That's so good. Olivia, did you have anything on that?
+1 to everything that you said. But I also think I would just add that, the Lord gave us everything in sending His Son to die for us. Like, it's the least that we can do to give back to Him. I think that it's out of obedience that we give, and He calls us to many times in the Bible and talks about it a lot too, which just shows how important He thinks it is and how I think easy it is to get wrapped up in money if we aren't focused on the things that He's focused on. So, yeah.
I love that. And then our last question before Q&A is kind of a spicy question. And so what are different views that you've heard on tithing? And is there a way to tithe that defeats the purpose? Both of you are on this one, so spice it up for us.
There's so many different views. So I think the first thing I'll say is that each person has their own personal conviction that you really just have to ask the Holy Spirit. Like, I think beyond the 10% that is said in the Bible, how you do it or what that looks like, I think just continue to consult the Holy Spirit. But there's different views. I've heard the view of only giving to the church versus giving to parachurches, and what does that look like? My personal stance is that you give to the kingdom of God and anyone that's preaching truth and continuing to forward that mission. So if that's a college ministry, if that's a church, I do think if you are attending a church and you're reaping the benefits from that, you should tithe something to that church. While I was in Texas and I would try out different churches, I would just tithe to the ones that I went to that weekend while I was figuring it out. And so I think that is something that has been my own personal conviction. There's been the pre-tax, post-tax conversation. Some people have the stance on, I am not going to tithe money that I don't actually see. I think there's many different views on that camp. So it just depends on where you find your own personal conviction there. I also have heard different views on different types of income. So if you are someone that receives income from like a restricted stock unit versus actually just your paycheck, should I tithe on that, or is it okay if I just tithe my money? I believe any form of income that you're getting, you should tithe on. So if I sell like a restricted stock unit that I am getting for income's purposes, then I believe that I should personally tithe on that. But those are a couple of like the nuances. And again, the Bible doesn't talk about every little thing, but he does give us the Spirit to guide where I think he wants to point each of us individually.
I don't know if I can add anything to that. That was a great answer.
Come on, give us some, hardball, like, you were talking about something yesterday.
She touched on all the controversies. I think there's this, I should have studied a little bit more for this question, but I think there's a section in Deuteronomy that talks about giving to ministry, which was the Levites, and then also giving 10%, or that 10% is split between the Levites and the poor. And then the New Testament reinforces that we should be remembering the poor. So just as a starting point, I think it's ministry and the poor. And then beyond that, how much you give, I think is whatever the Lord puts on your heart.
One more that Kelsey just reminded me of. We were talking yesterday about direct deposit giving. So if you are just kind of have it set up where your money leaves your bank account every month versus actually maybe giving it to someone or dropping it in the bucket at church, you like text it in, or I think they have that option, text it in or like wire it from your bank account. What does that look like? I think if you're doing it mindlessly and you're not actually seeing the money that's going out, it kind of takes away the purpose sometimes of your heart behind it. Which is why I kind of mentioned before, like putting the church's mission statement, or if you're giving to a church college ministry, putting up their newsletters, something that you are actively seeing what you're giving towards and are involved with in addition to the money that you're giving out. If you feel like you're becoming numb to it, then maybe challenge yourself and give in a different way. If it really is the act of seeing your money, your cash going into the buckets at church, I mean, I think that it can be different for everyone, but I would maybe just caution against the numbness around, oh, well, that's just gone anyways. Like, I'm not even going to pay attention to it. It's more just like, again, the heart behind why you're giving it.
Yeah, so good. And then just out of curiosity, for those of the people in the room who might not have like a stable income, they might just get paychecks here and there. What does tithing look like for that? This is my spontaneous question for them.
So I work at Amazon. I actually get paid once a month. So I have to budget out my whole month when I get my paycheck, which I don't think is very common. I think most people get paid like twice a month. But my fiance works more on like a, what's it called? Like compensation. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Compensation where he really doesn't know how much he's getting from a week to week, a day to day. So if you're in sales or something like that, where it really is variable with the income that you're getting. So I would make sure that you're still budgeting. If you have like funds that you're giving out to college ministries, maybe you have like $50 a month goes to this person, or $100 a month always goes to your church, whatever it is, make sure that those are budgeted out. And then if you have more than you think you do, then tithe on that extra and maybe see if there's someone that needs it. I know in December, there's always like holiday drives and gift trees and things like that. But I think that's, again, going back to the conversation of just asking the Holy Spirit, where do you want me to give this? But being diligent that you are still giving that 10%. Yeah.
I also just want to paint this picture before we hop into Q&A, and this concept of maybe you're a person in the room who's like even just like struggling to make ends meet, and every paycheck you get is just enough. The most beautiful example that I have seen of kingdom generosity is when I was living in Rwanda for a month, and during the church service, basically, they had a time of tithes and offerings and whatnot, and people would come to the front and put, their money in these like baskets, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden we watched this woman like walk down the aisle and bring these baskets. And then she left, and basically someone had told us that was like that was all she had. So yeah, I just like want us to remember that it might not be even like financially what we have to give, but even praying about God, what might you have me give? And if it's hard to sacrifice, that's probably a posture check of that's probably what he's asking you to sacrifice. So thank you for answering all of the prepared questions. We are going to hop into a round of spontaneous Q&A, and we have some great questions that I have right here. And so if you haven't already texting questions, you can actually like ones to have them go to the top. So if you type in slido.com and put in that number, you can see all the questions that I'm looking at as well. The one that is at the top with 11 likes says, what advice do you have for people wanting to buy a home and stop renting, but feel discouraged by the rising prices in Washington?
I'm right there with you. I would say, figure out the reason why you want to buy a home and where you are financially. I think if you can, I know there's like this term called house hacking. If you're not familiar with it, it's where you can purchase a home, but then have someone living in either a room or a subset of your home. So if you have like a basement or something like that, there's a way essentially to get rent and also pay your mortgage that's included in that. So that could be a really interesting way to kind of hack the system a little bit. My brother's done it he bought a house and then made 2 units out of it, lived in one, rented out the other, and then his mortgage was cut in half. So house hacking is a term that I would definitely look into if you're trying to kind of get around the system a little bit.
Awesome. Also, Merrick, where are you? Do you have anything to say on this since you're a literal real estate agent?
It's a lot more possible than you think. You just have to go about it the right way and strategize over the next.
So what he said was, it's a lot more possible than you think, and you just have to strategize. I'm sorry, you're all the way across the room.
Yeah, it's a lot more possible than you think, and you just have to be very intentional about your plans over time and work towards that goal.
Awesome. Hopefully the recording picked that up. But if you have any questions about that, talk to Merrick in the back. Well, the next question we have is, when a homeless person or anyone asks for money, what should we do? As God said to help others, I'm confused whether to give money as it might be used for wrong.
Yeah, this is a tough one because you obviously want to have compassion on someone that's down on their luck or poor, but you also don't want to feed an addiction, which is often the case why people are homeless. I've come to the conclusion that this is just part of giving to the poor, and giving to a place like Seattle Union Gospel Mission is kind of my solution there. It's because they do some great work with the poor. They house, battered women with, single parents, things like that. And they just do a phenomenal job of trying to get people out of that situation and give them the tools and the resources that they need to kind of move out of being homeless. So that's where I've come down. I don't want to feed an addiction, and you can't in the moment really know if there's an addiction there. But then occasionally I'm walking downtown because I work downtown. There's just someone that God just prompts me to give like whatever's in my wallet to. And just, you have to have an open heart to it. So there's sort of that head answer and then the heart answer. And I think you just have to kind of balance that out a little bit.
That's awesome.
Something else I've heard of some friends doing is, if you really are worried about where money is going towards, buying gift cards to restaurants around the area, like a Subway gift card, McDonald's gift card, whatever it is. My coworker also carries around really thick men's socks around her backpack in the winter time, and she just hands those out to people that she sees in South Lake Union where we work. So there's definitely a lot more practical ways you can do it, but if you are feeling prompted, I would say do it. I've seen friends just give money and have conversations with people, and I've asked them about it after, and they're like, it's not my money. So I was really convicted by that as well.
Yeah. And also when it comes to generosity, a smile and just asking how someone's going costs nothing. So if you feel that guilt, even just rolling down your window for the person that's, on the side of the freeway, that costs nothing. And just giving someone the time of day, I feel like that's just the most honoring thing. But also too, it's like one of my friends for his birthday parties, he had us all make like little bags to give out with, socks and that kind of thing. And so again, it's that posture of giving generously and that kind of thing. But our next question is, how do you feel, or how do you approach thinking about the income disparity in America? I'm going to start this over. I'm so sorry, y'all. How do you approach thinking about the income disparity in America, not feeling guilt about your financial state?
Okay.
You want me to take that one?
Sure.
I don't want to get too much on a soapbox here, but when you think about America and the opportunity that we have in America, and you look at the per capita income and look at the opportunity set that's here versus what's available around the world, there is quite a bit of not only mobility of income, people that can actually go from the middle class to the upper middle class, and that opportunity still exists today. But with that said, we have to be aware that there are folks out there that have just a incredibly difficult time making it in America, and that's where I think Christians really need to reach out and really provide for the poor. And as Christians, we want to make sure that we are stepping into that gap, right? So if you have an income level that's above average or, in the top 1% or top 10%, there really is an obligation there to kind of help the poor. And the government it's part of the government's responsibility to do that, but it's also our responsibility.
Awesome. Very well said. There's so many good questions on here, so I'm almost wondering if we could do a rapid fire speed round.
There you go.
So how do you decide the line between giving a ton of money to others versus saving for something you want or need?
I think that one is really, again, about like heart conviction and posture. If you save, or if you give 10% and have like a minimum saving of like 20%, then anything above that is kind of, I think, where you feel just convicted to give, honestly.
Can Christians strive for generational wealth without it becoming an idol? Yes. Can Christians strive for generational wealth without it becoming an idol?
Yeah, I think you always want to pass on to the next generation better than what you had. But I also think it's really important to also pass on the ideologies that we as Christians hold. So if you really aspire to be generous, to also pass those ideals on to your kids, to have generations go after you that are also generous people. I think about the couple in Austin and how they're striving to give 40% of their income. Like, that is incredible, and they're also setting their family up for success. So I think it is, but I also think that you need to make sure that you're instilling the generous behaviors as well.
That's awesome. There's so many questions that are just now coming in that I'm like, oh, those are so good. But for the sake of those that are also being liked and brought to the top, Dave Ramsey has been involved in some controversies that makes me hesitant to trust. Do the basic principles stand true regardless of his potential character flaws?
What controversies?
I don't know the controversies, but I would say yes. I think there are some things that he talks about that you just have to figure out what's best for you. If you listen to his podcast, a lot of the people that call in are in very, very difficult situations where their debt is far outpacing their income that they have. And so I think his steps make a lot of sense for those people. I don't think his steps are necessarily for everyone in every season, but I think that they help a lot of people for what they are. Apart from his character, I don't know what that is exactly, but I do think that his stance and approach is one that's helped a lot of people.
Maybe this is just the, like we all fall short of the glory of God, but I mean, use discernment. Okay, next question.
I'll jump on that just real quickly. I'll jump into the controversy here. The Dave Ramsey program is kind of tried and true, and it's helped a ton of people. I'm thinking about a potential controversy. They bought a big house or something like that, so maybe that's what people are talking about. But it really is a well thought out and systematic way to approach budgeting, getting out of debt. I disagree with some of his things on the investment side, but that's neither here nor there. But his basic approach has helped a ton of people.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to try to do as many as I can in a very small amount of time. Are there exceptions to tithing 10%? Should you tithe 10% if you're making ends meet, or if it causes you to go into debt and not save for retirement?
I personally think that the Bible is really clear on this. I think the Bible does call us to tithe 10%. I think it's a way to release control to the Lord and to let him show you how he can provide for you. I do recognize that there are different financial situations and pictures that can be really difficult. And if there is no money coming in, then I think like Kelsey said, there's other ways that you can give the talents or the things that you have that might not be monetary, but just like the story in the Bible of the woman giving 2 coins versus giving someone else who had an abundance, not giving their full 10%. I think it's your heart posture towards the Lord saying, Lord, I trust you with this, and this is all I have, but I'm giving it to you.
Awesome. This is a spicy question. Is saving for retirement an idol because you're saving for future stability? Spicy.
I don't really know, but I'm kind of taking this approach as like, if you're done working when you're 65, you're going to need some funds to carry you after that. I don't think we're meant to work forever. I don't think we can work forever in like a 9-to-5 job type of mindset. I think it would just be maybe how much you're putting towards your retirement. If you're throwing everything at it, I would be a little wary that you're not investing and being generous now. And again, I think it comes back to that control and that saving out of self-protection. I think if you're saving out of self-protection and fear, then that's not a healthy mindset.
And also going back to idolatry, right? It's like what you're daydreaming about. So if you're actively worrying about your future, that's a pretty good pulse check too. 2 more questions. Okay. What is the best and smartest way to invest your money? We are getting through so many of these. This is great.
Say the question again.
Yes. What is the best and smartest way to invest your money? There's probably a lot of different opinions about it. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different opinions.
There's actually a very good book that we recommend to kind of the next generation. It's a book called The Little Book of Common Sense Investing by Jack Bogle. And I would recommend that as a starting point because it just talks about fees in the investment industry, which are outrageous. Talks about the power of compounding, which is just a basic principle that you should apply to investing. So start there, and I think that would be a good start for folks to just get familiar with investing and how to do it. And if you follow the advice in that book, you'll be fine.
Awesome. I guess we all have to read that book now. So one question that I appreciate because it's for the person that needs a next step. If I don't understand any of these things, Roth IRA, stocks, 401k, HSA, etc., and how they work or how to set them up, should I invest in a financial advisor? What do I do?
Good question. There's lots of free advice out there. So literally, if you have money to invest, you can go into a Schwab branch and they will provide you all the free advice that you want. There's also some bad free advice online, so you got to be careful. But there's lots of ways that you can get at the information. And at some point, you might need a financial advisor if your wealth is at a certain level and you need to do some estate planning. There's some complex tax things. For most people, you can get the advice that you need for free, and then at some point, you're going to need sort of more sophisticated advice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll also look around at other churches to see if they're doing any sort of like workshops or classes and include that on the resources page, just because we, again, don't want this to just be the one conversation that you bank yourself on, pun intended, but that it goes beyond this. So thank you, Olivia and Sean. Great rapid fire questions round. Awesome. Well done. Well done.